Welcome along to the Seahawks Draft Blog live stream instant reaction to the win against the Detroit Lions. A lot of things to get into with this game. And if you want to join in with a question or two, you can do in the live chat there. Super chats get priority. So if you want to send a super chat in, bang one in to us and we will come to it straight away. So, Robbie, give us your take then. The Seahawks moved to 2-2 and they have defeated the Lions in what I am describing as a great game in the Big 12.
I mean, it was fun. It was a fun game. Obviously both defenses look. I don't even have a good word for it. They just look terrible. But I mean, I like what they were doing on offense. They came out. They played the really well on the scheme, and then like the way Penny ran, and Geno made enough throws to keep us going. So I mean, overall fun game. I kind of expected this to be a win for us just because, the Lions are, the Lions, and they were even more decimated today. So, but a little surprised how bad the defense is looking. I mean, they're pretty horrendous.
Yeah, and, that's an obvious talking point really about the defense. I'm going to come to that. And, for me, Robbie, I mean, it was a fun game. There's no getting away from it. It was a fun game. I probably would have had more fun with this game if the Seahawks had won 13-10. I would have enjoyed this more, I think, purely because I wanted to see the defense do something, Robbie. And if this had been a game where the defense smothered Detroit and the offense just couldn't get going, I could have lived with that. I really wanted to see some defensive improvements, and they didn't show any. I've got a lot of thoughts on the defense. Let's start with the positives, though, Robbie. I've put my instant reaction post up on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. I liked the offensive game plan from this game. And, a lot of not everything worked. It took them forever to get the running game going. And even then it was a bit jagged, wasn't it? They kind of relied on those big explosive plays, those home runs from Rashad Penny at the end. But I'm glad we saw those. We've missed them since the season restarted. We were seeing them at the end of last year and they were back in this game. So really pleased to see that. But the motion stuff, the misdirection worked very, very well. Getting Geno Smith out into space and having those tight ends running across adjacent with him, or Tyler Lockett. That's what I was expecting to see when Shane Waldron came here, Robbie. Those were the kind of plays that really used to piss you off when we were watching the Seahawks play the Rams or the 49ers, because you're just watching it happen, and it happens again and again and again. You kind of have no answer for it. It's really frustrating, but it's a really economical way to move the football. And the Seahawks did that today, and they kept doing it, and rightly so, because the Lions had no answer for it. Now, there may be, look, I saw the Saints earlier today playing the Vikings in London, not live. I will be at the game next weekend in London, but I was not at this one, but I was watching it on the television. And the Saints are a much better defense, and I don't think they'll watch the tape of this game, and they ain't going to let the Seahawks do that for 4 quarters. But if a team is willing to let you do that for 4 quarters, fill your boots, Robbie. And the Seahawks definitely filled the boots today with that.
Yeah, and run behind Abe Lucas whenever possible, because that guy is just a beast. I mean, some of the pulls that he had today on that, especially on that one long run, he just sandwiched a guy, and he looks special for a rookie. I'm really, really excited about him. There's a couple players that I'm just, we talked about building like some of those building blocks on a team, and he looks like he's one of those guys. And I don't want to jump the gun, but Tariq Woolen, I know, the pick 6, but I mean, he's fast. I know he got beat on a couple of ways, but he looks like a guy that he's going to take some of those rookie lumps, but if he can put it all together, he looks like another one of those guys. It's a late round steal and could be a player for us for a really long time. So I'm really excited about some of the players that we're getting to see, build up upon this team that we want to have going forward. But man, I tell you, Abe Lucas is something.
Yeah, Abe Lucas is. I'll come back to the defense in a bit, but I watched Abe Lucas because he has received a lot of publicity this week. A lot of people have been talking him up. Kenneth Arthur was very kind to put a tweet out, sort of highlighting that SeahawksDraftBlog.com was probably Abe Lucas's biggest fan in the draft season, and we were consistently had him. I never wavered from that, having him in the first round range. And I was having a discussion with Ray Roberts on Twitter, and he was getting a bit pissy, really, Robbie, because I don't know why, because I wasn't arguing with him. I was kind of like celebrating Abe Lucas's positivity. But he was saying there was no sign of it in college. There was no sign of this in college. There was no sign of any quality in college. There was none of this. There was none of that. I was kind of like, yeah, but I watched the games. I watched a whole bunch of his games and just kept seeing good stuff. Like I don't really understand this viewpoint that he was awful in college or that he was poor in the running game or whatever and stuff like that. I just saw a really good player, and then you go to the Senior Bowl, and I think of all the players who got massive publicity at the Senior Bowl: Trevor Penning, the guy from Austria who's about 27 years old, that went in the second round or whatever, Bernard Ryman, other players, Robbie, that got loads and loads of publicity. And I watched every single one of the snaps, 1v1, all the O-line snaps from the Senior Bowl last year, because they all ended up on YouTube. And I just thought Abe Lucas was the best of all the offensive linemen there. And he got there was no talk, there was nothing. Then he went to the combine, was by far the best offensive lineman in the drills on the field, and tested amazingly well. Still no publicity. There was like one tweet from one, I can't remember who it was, like a McShay Kuiper type, about 3 weeks before the draft, saying, hey, this guy's pretty good. And then I thought, it's going to take off now. And then it didn't. It didn't take off. There was nothing. And there he was in round 3. I mean, look, the Seahawks have, I called it a masterstroke on the blog today, and it is a masterstroke. Think of all of those years of question marks at right tackle. I mean, even when the position was solidified by Breno Giacomini, they've not had somebody who can play that position, who you can really believe in for the long haul. And they've got Abe Lucas now at 4 years of club control. And already for me, Robbie, he's looking like one of the best right tackles in the NFL. And he naturally fits that area. It's just so exciting to have somebody like that who can nail down that side. Now, on the other side, I think a lot of the issues that I had with Charles Cross are showing as well. I was not high on Charles Cross. I did not rate him as very highly. I didn't have him in the first round. I had him as a second round player. And I think his strength remains an issue, and some of his footwork. And we saw that, he should not be being beaten the way he was by Charles Harris in this game today. So he's still got a lot of work to do, and he's got to get stronger. But Abraham Lucas, Robbie, fantastic. I thought on the first viewing, and look, you can't get everything from a first viewing, but I thought that was a 10 out of 10 performance from him today. Fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree. He was lights out, one of the best highlights of the game for me. And then, you talk about Charles Cross, the other position I'd really like to see them address, and we can go back and talk about it all the time, but is
your dog sounds very excited about what's going on there, Robbie. Having a good scratch at the thought of Abe Lucas for the next 10 years at right tackle.
She's getting pretty old, so she just tried to get up. That was pretty bad. Sorry about that. The center position, I'd love us to see us attack that center position in the draft next year, or bring someone in, because watching the interior of our line is pretty bad. I'd love to see Lewis go back to right guard, get a new left guard, and then get a center position. Those are kind of my weak spots for the team on the offensive line. And even today, I feel like that when they would need that first down, they went that 3rd and 5. It looked like they went to the left side towards Cross and Lewis, and they got it. But
can I jump in there, Robbie?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. There's one kind of thing I have. I think is an important point, and I think people will raise the point that you've made about the interior offensive line. And I think this is really important to mention. They have just flipped scheme. They have gone from the Solari scheme to the Rams scheme. And if you watch the Rams offensive line, what they tend to do is they tend to move tackles who played tackle in college to guard. And they have taller, athletic guards, and they have a center like Austin Blythe, who is, well, for want of a more complimentary description, short and stumpy, who can kind of just do the calls up front and get everything done. Now, the guys sort of taking over this offensive line have been handed Gabe Jackson, who was a college guard and an NFL guard, and he's past his best, and Damian Lewis, who was a road grading 320-pound right guard for LSU, who just blew people off the line in the running game. This is not and they've got Austin Blythe because he understands the blocking, until they have Rams-style guards I don't think this interior running game and interior blocking is going to work properly, Robbie. So I love Damian Lewis, and I think they've messed him about moving him to left guard, and I don't know why they've done that. But I don't know if he's for long with this team, and maybe he ends up somewhere else next year and they trade him away or something. I still think if you want to get anything out of people like Stone Forsyth, I mean, he is the kind of player that the Rams change to guard and play guard. I don't know if he's good enough for that, but that's the kind of thing that they do. And I just wonder whether or not next year they may well draft some, I don't know, 6th round tackle who's athletic and kick him inside, Robbie, and play guard. I almost wish a little bit, as they were throwing money around, and they have, because I still hear people saying they've got loads of money for next year, and that's come dramatically down. They'll have about as much to spend next year as they've had in the last few years. I wish they'd just gone out and got someone like Austin Corbett or something like that, who'd played in that scheme, has played guard there, just so they got somebody who kind of knew it and could fit in there, Robbie. Because I think until they've got those types of guards, I don't think you're going to see this offensive line reach its very best.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the point I was making. They just don't seem like they fit. And then and I don't know if Lewis going back to right guard would help, but you're right. I mean, moving him to left guard just seems like it's changed his total makeup of who he is as a player. And for me, the center position has been a talking point for the last few years. And I know they've switched schemes, and I know their kind of thought process on what they want out of the center, but man, I still think I think you still need a good center. I think you can do better than what you've got. That's all I was going to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's become a hot topic in Seattle, the center position, mainly because certain people keep going on about. I'm not you, Robert, by the way. People keep going on about Creed Humphrey, and I kind of it's like the Frozen film, which I have watched 1,000 times because my kids grew up with it. Let it go. It's time to let it go. He can't come to Seattle now. It's time to let it go. And I would be fully open to them considering centre prospects in the future. And there are one or two in college who I've not studied properly, but people are talking up as not high first round picks, nonsense, but as picks that could go in the first 4 rounds, let's say. And if you've got a centre being touted in that range, I will go and watch them. But yeah, that's where we are with the offensive line. I want to talk a bit about Geno Smith. So I've got sort of two feelings on Geno Smith right now, Robbie. On the one hand, I do feel somewhat validated in my opinion of Geno Smith. My point was always that when he plays the bad opponents, he will look pretty good, as he did against Jacksonville last year. And when he plays good opponents, it will look like the New Orleans game last year. And I think with the way that he played against San Francisco, and with the way that he played in the second half against Denver, and to some extent the second half in Atlanta, I think it was justified, that opinion that I had. But I'm happy to admit that he's played a lot better than I thought over the course of 4 games so far. I think the main things that stand out for me are that I figured that he would be able to move the ball and he would be relatively economical, but he would do two things. One, he would have turnovers or would risk turnovers, like plays that could be turnovers that maybe he was a bit lucky with, or actual turnovers. And the other thing that I thought was there'd be a lot of checking down. It'd be a lot of underneath stuff. It would be passing it out to the flat. I was watching Kirk Cousins today for Minnesota in the London game, and it was painful to watch, Robbie. Painful, because everything's underneath. As soon as he gets bolted off his first read, he goes underneath. And Geno Smith doesn't do that. In fairness to Geno Smith, he's throwing on the mid-range very, very well. He's not got the arm to go bombs away downfield, massive plays. That's gone to Denver with Russell Wilson. But his mid-range throws are pretty good. He throws a nice ball 20, 30 yards, which can still get you some decent explosive plays in the passing game. He has become one of those players that I think opponents' fan bases will think, Geno Smith will be okay this week. And then as you're actually watching him, he will be quite frustrating for some fan bases because they'll think they're expecting one thing and they're getting another. So I think that's to his credit. And as someone who has been very, very critical of Geno Smith, I'm happy to hold my hand up and say, he is not the man for the future, but he is the man for the present. And he's playing well. He's playing better than Tavares Jackson did in 2011. I know I've heard a couple of things this week, and I wish Adam Nathan was here because I had a bone to pick with him about something he's been saying in his podcast. But the comparisons to 2011, thing being called lazy, I don't agree with. I think that's the basis from which you can. That's a great year that turned into a great team. That was that's how the great team was formed. Sort of recalling back to what happened then, to see if there are any signs of it this year, or just having an apples to apples comparison with it and trying to work out. I don't have any issue with it. I don't think it's lazy. I just think it's just an easy way to sort of base a judgment on this year. And I think Geno Smith's playing far better than Tavares Jackson did in 2011, and he deserves credit for that. Well done, Geno Smith.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he was 23 for 30 today, had 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. Plus, he ran a bunch today. I think overall, I've been really pleasantly surprised by Geno Smith. I didn't expect him to play this well at all. And I actually thought by, within the first 6-7 weeks, he'd probably be benched. At this point, I don't think that's going to even happen. I mean, he'd have to really turn a corner and start playing horribly for that to happen. I think he's a starter for the year. I've seen quite a few people talk about like, well, maybe we don't need to go for a quarterback. Let's just let Geno ride it for another year or two. And I don't think that. Let's tone that down a little bit. Let's let him play against some of the tougher opponents. We still need a quarterback. I think that should still be our number one focus going into the draft. And people talking about the defense and such. I don't really know. I mean, we have a lot of holes on defense, and we can fill that up. But I think it starts with the quarterback, and I think you definitely want to build up a great roster, and if you can have a quarterback come into that situation. But this team, I think we still need that quarterback. I just don't think we're quite ready for that.
Well, look, I can already see it happening now, and I'll just skip it. I was going to save this to the end, Robbie, but I'm going to get to it now because I think this is a more interesting conversation, really, than talking about how crap the defense is, because it is pretty crap. So we'll part the defensive talk for a bit, and we'll come to this, because I'm seeing now in the comments section, and I'll highlight. Look, this is super chat away. If you have a question for us, stick it in a super chat. We'll come to it, but I just want to highlight stuff like this. So this is from Graham. Assuming Geno continues the season as is, and we get a top QB in the prospect in the draft, does Geno start next year to give the prospect time? Well, I have no issue with that per se, provided that Geno Smith continues at this level. I mean, personally, I would rather go out and get a quarterback who, there's one quarterback in this draft who I think can start very, very quickly, and I would like to come out with them, and that is Will Levis. The problem that you've got is the more that I've got a huge write-up, thousands of words again from the quarterbacks this weekend, Robbie. For me, I think there's going to be a massive bun fight for Will Levis next year. I think you've got Detroit will be looking at him, the Giants, the Seahawks. Who else is there? Everybody. I think everybody who needs a quarterback, Robbie, is going to be after this guy. And the chances are, and I think this is an increasingly good chance, that because of his experience in the pro system that he's playing in, because he is playing behind it, he's been sacked 18 times in 5 games.
His offensive line
I was watching Washington against UCLA, and they mentioned in the second quarter, that's the first sack that Michael Penix Jr. has experienced this year. I was like, wow, he's been sacked once in 5 games, or 4 and a bit games. Will Levis has been sacked 18 times. It's just sack. His line it could be more. It could easily be more than 18 as well, frankly. But he is succeeding despite the adversity. And look, if you're a team who sort of says, we're not good, that's why we're picking first overall. We are the worst team in the NFL. Right? The chances are you're bringing a quarterback into a situation where he ain't going to have a great offensive line. He ain't going to have a whole bunch of weapons. He ain't going to have a great defense to play. So who's best served to come into that environment? A person who's done it all, who can just sort of survive through this while you build up your roster. That's why I think he's going to be the target. And if the first team with the first pick thinks, actually, do you know what? We're going to have a go-between and we'll take CJ Stroud first and sit him for a year. That's fine. Someone might do that. And they might give CJ Stroud. And I think CJ Stroud probably does need a year to sit. But if you are minded to take a quarterback who can start for you quickly for whatever reason, marketing reasons or whatever, Robbie, because there are teams who feel that way, then Levis is your guy. So he's going to go, I think, first, second overall. I think he's going to go very, very early, which means that he won't be there for the Seahawks. Unless you trade up, which I'm leaning now towards just go and get your guy and stash him and forget about it. And then at least you've got that addressed. You can't keep kicking that can down the road. But if you are sort of picking a little bit later on and you have to look elsewhere, then I'm completely comfortable with if Geno Smith carries on this way, him being the starter for maybe another year, or at least until you want to make the exchange to that quarterback, or if you want to have the competition. And look, the more games that Seattle win, Robbie, and the two wins already, the further and further away you get from picking first, second, third overall. And the more you then have to sort of think, okay, it's probably not going to be these guys. Is it going to be an Anthony Richardson if he declares? Because if it is him, he probably is going to need time and to sit, and you're going to have to bring him along. And there are other quarterbacks who fit that bill as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at just the, where we've gone just with that one win, we were picking third with your tankathon. We're picking third, and now we're picking 14th compared to what's happened. Of course, there's still games to be played today, but I mean, just all things considering, a win can change things quite a bit, long season. But I think you're right. I mean, Levis is going to go in that top 3 position for sure, one of the first 3 picks. And, I think you're right. Trading up is not the worst idea at all. And I just go get him, and then you have your quarterback. I mean, and then there's no guarantee that he could do. I mean, like we've talked about, Trevor Lawrence, he's playing a lot better this year. It's a surefire, guaranteed superstar, and he hasn't quite been that yet. But maybe he'll get there. So there's still some question marks on that. But I think if you like the guy enough, use your picks, go get him, and then and build around him. I think that's a good way to do it.
And I think I anticipate this is what's going to happen now, Robbie. And I said last week I think this is going to happen, and I think it's going to happen even more now, given. What was the final score in this game? 48-45. Given that the offense has scored 48 points, and look, I think we can all admit that the Detroit defense is as bad as Seattle's. I mean, we've seen 3 teams in the last week with Atlanta, Seattle, and Detroit who can't play defense, and it showed. And we're going to see a team next week who can't play offense but can play defense in New Orleans. So we'll see how that goes. And Graham has sent this in as well. I think Graham was the one who asked the question. So big thank you to Graham for the super chat. Get those coming in. That one says super sticker. I don't know if this is a new thing that YouTube would do. Super sticker.
I'm sure what that is, yeah.
But get them sent in. If you have a question, I'm seeing questions in the live chat, but we stick to super chats with questions. But if you have one about the draft, or if you have one about the team, or if you just want to make a statement, then super chat away. Now, what I was coming to, Robbie, was I think people are now going to say, well, you don't need a quarterback, or you forget it. Move. You can clearly just get somebody in to play quarterback. The defense is where you need to spend your picks. You need to invest in. And I don't know which defenders people are, because who are you drafting? Which defenders are you drafting? Because Will Anderson's going to go very, very, very early. He could be the number 1 overall pick. I don't think he'll get out the top 3. There'll be somebody in that top 3 who decides they're going to take him. Jalen Carter at Georgia. I mean, this is a good player. He's not a top 10 pick. He's not an impact pass rushing defensive tackle of the Gerald McCoy, Ndamukong Suh type that warrants to go that early. He just isn't. Brian Brissy didn't play again at the weekend. I somewhat feel like he's just a more athletic, better version of Carter, really, in that he's not a game wrecker. He's just a very good interior defensive lineman. You've got a couple of cornerbacks who might get into the top 10. Basically, what I'm saying, Robbie, is I don't think the players are there to do it. If you could, get a Micah Parsons type and a I don't know, a Myles Garrett type, then yeah, by all means, don't go for a quarterback and draft them instead. But I don't think those players are there. And I don't think this is a particularly great draft at the top of the board. I think that a bit like last year, Robbie, I think what we're going to see is good depth, because I've got a whole list of names. You should see the flipping list I've got of names of players that I've either watched or are yet to watch, or I'm trying to catch up on, or players that just caught my eye a little bit. I want to watch a bit more. long, long list of players eligible for 2023, but I don't have those players at the top that I think there's a top 10 pick, there's a top 10 pick. It's very, very light there. And for that reason, I'm saying I would suggest to people, no. The objective should not be to ignore quarterback and draft defense. You've got to improve this defense, but you have to find a way to do that without neglecting the need to get a quarterback for the next 10 or 15 years. And you have got one shot at this. You have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. The year after, you won't have that. You will have 1 first-round pick, 1 second-round pick. And that's what you're going to be. Your chances to move up are smaller than ever. And people keep sending me messages, Robbie. Oh, why don't you go and get the USC quarterback the year after? Okay, so is the plan next year to be the worst team in the NFL so you can pick first overall and get him? Or what about Quinn Ewers at Texas? Oh, you mean the guy who's played 2 games and then got injured? Like he's played 2 college games and he got hurt. And you're saying that we should draft him in a year and a half instead of like one of these guys. I can't go there. You've got to get a quarterback, Robbie. You've got to come out this draft with a quarterback. You have to come out with the quarterback. Ideally, you do that without having to trade up because then you've got 3 other high picks that you can draft defense with. But you've got to come out with a quarterback. And look, it doesn't have to be Will Levis. Like I think sometimes people think I'm, Will Levis's biggest fan. I am a big fan of Will Levis. I'd be comfortable with a CJ Stroud as well. I think you've just got to be realistic about what Stroud needs, which is a complete technical lesson in how to run an offense. And he needs a year. And Anthony Richardson, I am a fan of, even though we had another interception today against Eastern Washington. I am a fan of his because I see the potential, Robbie, to be a Josh Allen type. So I like other players. I like Jaron Hall. I thought he was a bit crap this week, though, when they played Utah State. There are players out there. You've got to get a quarterback. We have to be sat here in May, Robbie, saying this is the quarterback that you hope is going to be here for the next 10 years. It has to be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's just kind of, and again, this is not to, and I think people will mistake this as we're just hating on Geno Smith. We're not. I think the reality is Geno Smith is playing good football. We acknowledge that. But again, I want to see him play against, I want him to see a play like this against better defenses. And I want to see him take the ball and go win a game. That's what I want to see because I just don't trust that he can do it. That's not a knock on him. I think he played really well today, but I just think this is kind of the things that going forward, I'd like to see is, use this opportunity to get the quarterback of the future and then build around him. That's just kind of what I'd like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've kind of set everything up for that, with 2 bookend tackles, re-signing DK Metcalf. You've got Tyler Lockett, you've paid Noah Fant for next year. I mean, it's a bit
a young running back.
Yeah, you've got a young running back. If Rashad Penny continues, they'll try and keep him. And the market for running backs is really weak. So I don't think anybody's necessarily, 4 games in already, and Rashad Penny's still, this is him, really. He's not suddenly become Jonathan Taylor. So I don't think anybody's going to go, have $40 million guaranteed, Rashad. So you might be able to bring him back. You've got to make some improvements to that interior offensive line, as we've talked about. But generally, the stage is set for a good young quarterback. And I tell you what, I think Will Levis, if you'd have plonked Will Levis into that team today, I think he would have scored points as well. And you're right, this is not a criticism of Geno Smith. Geno Smith's, 32? Has he turned 32 yet? I mean, I knew it was coming up. Okay, he's 32 next Monday, so a week tomorrow. So even if you love Geno Smith, even if you're Geno Smith's dad, you are sort of accepting that you need somebody for the long term. Unless Geno Smith's going to play well into his 40s, you are going to need somebody who can be the long-term answer at quarterback. And I'm happy with Geno Smith being the answer for now. I've said that. We've been very positive about Geno. But you do need that quarterback for the future. And all the point of this conversation is to say, if there's anybody out there who thinks just draft defense and stick with as it is, and that's going to be a solution, I'm there to tell you that right now, those defensive players that you're hoping for, they're not out there in this draft. This is a chance to go and get a quarterback and build from that. And I hope some defensive players emerge. I'm hoping that there's going to be some options there. But, at the moment, it's I don't see a game-wrecking edge, apart from Will Anderson. I don't really see a game-wrecking interior defensive lineman. There's no linebacker of the Devin Smith mold who I would say, well, that's, your Luke Kuechly type, go and get them and they'll solve all your problems. there are a couple of cornerbacks that I like, and there's a whole bunch of safeties that I'm seeing probably for later on that I like later in the draft. But that's really it. So okay, that's my point on that. Let's bring it back to the here and now and talk about that defense, Robbie. The defense.
You just brought up the linebackers, and I can't tell you how bad they played. I mean, I know people will look at the stat line and think Jordan Brooks had a great game with 11 tackles. And I saw him whiff big time on one of their big runs by Jamal Williams. He scored a touchdown. Cody Barton just looks terrible. These linebackers, they need a whole refresh on the line, and they need a whole refresh on the linebackers. And then Jordan Brooks is coming up for a contract now, and you think, man, this guy I don't think he's worth paying. Like, I mean, honestly, I'd let him walk at this point in time. I'd let him walk.
Yeah, Jordan Brooks. Yeah, you're right. Jordan Brooks. I mean, even the announcers mentioned it today. He leads the NFL in tackles, and since last season, he leads the NFL in tackles, and he had 11 more tackles today. I mean, I'm struggling to think of a plays made, Robbie, where I've been impressed since they drafted him, like a wow play, like a big play. Jordan Brooks is what, 2022? We're into his third year of his career now. What is he doing? Like, can you remember one game-changing moment from him? He just doesn't provide anything. He's very good at being there to make a tackle when you need him to sometimes, and he collects the tackles well. And I accept that part of that is the defensive line not playing very well, and it hasn't been, which means that he has to make a lot of tackles. And this is a continuation from last year where the linebackers are somewhat exposed all the time or having to make these tackles because the D-line's not doing its job. But he's not been good enough. But that's, he is by far and away not the thing we need to talk about right now. It is definitely Cody Barton and Josh Jones. Josh Jones, for me, Robbie, can just go back to where he came from right now. Like, get somebody else in who's young, whatever, just get somebody else in and put Ryan Neal on the field all the time. Like, he is just awful. It's hard to watch him play. And then the two sort of great issues on defense combined on that TJ Hawkinson run, where Jones initially doesn't get the stop, and he's got about, I'd say, all of about 7 inches of space to work with TJ Hawkinson, but somehow manages to make the most of that 7 inches of space and evade Cody Barton's crap attempt at a tackle and romp forward for 81 yards. And there was the Goff run. I mean, and Cody Barton looked like he was. Do you know when like you watch these? I don't know if you've ever seen these. I'm not a big. I used to be a massive Madden fan, and then the game got awful, and now I'm not anymore. And I kind of like watching these videos where there's like a glitch, and like if people watch the Jared Goff 2-point conversion when he runs it in, it almost looks like Cody Barton's in a glitch, like he's kind of like looking straight at Goff but doesn't understand what's going on. Then he spins round. And Goff's in the end zone, and it is like he's becoming a Madden glitch, Cody Barton. And there were just various other things, wasn't there, where he's not got contain on a run, or his tackling's terrible. He's all over the place, Robbie. He's absolutely all over the place. How on earth did they not even sign? Like, Quan Alexander was out there for ages. Just go on, I don't know, bring him in and test him with Barton, make them compete together. You could have always cut him afterwards. I mean, he was around for ages. Could you not have drafted someone and said, try and win the job? There had to be a better option than just sort of, going along with Cody Barton at linebacker and making him an unchallenged starter, Robbie.
Yeah, he looked bad last year too, and we've been kind of harping on him. I did say, like, it was the first game of the season, I said I owe Cody Barton an apology because he played well. Ever since then, it's been just downhill. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. It's just really bad. He's all over the map, and like you said, he looks lost on the defense. He's not containing well, getting run by, and then he can't cover. So he's a total liability on the defense. I think all the linebackers are, and kind of what you mentioned, Josh Jones shouldn't be out there either way. I mean, yeah, I don't know why Ryan Neal isn't getting more snaps. I mean, I need to look at like kind of the overall snap count, but Ryan Reynolds seems like a much better football player all around. I don't know. I'm super confused by our defense. I mean, they were without a ton of their starters, and they put up 45 on us. You know, I mean, that's crazy. And this is not a high flying offense that I would expect to put up a ton of points. So, Pete needs to do something about this defense and do it quickly, because it's going to get really ugly when we play teams that can, that can stop us on offense, and then destroy on defense. It's not good all around, not good on the defensive side of the ball. There are a few bright spots. Like I said, I really like Tariq Woolen and what he could bring. I still have high hopes for Kobe Bryant, but the defensive line, the linebackers, all starts up front. We just need better players there. What? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said you still had high hopes for Cody Barton, but you said Kobe Bryant, didn't you?
Kobe Bryant,
yeah.
No. I don't have high hopes.
I was about to call for medical attention.
No. I've never been a fan. So
Okay, I was just checking on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of if you'd have said, I mean, first of all, and I am going to mention this, Robbie. I'm 100% correct on my predictions so far. I thought the Seahawks would beat Denver, lose to San Francisco. I thought that they would. I thought they would lose to Atlanta, and I thought they would win this game. I did not think they were going to give up 45 points and win the game, but they did. So I'm looking at the offensive stats, and they give up 520 yards, 5.8 yards per run, and 7.9 yards per play. And that is without DeAndre Swift. That's without St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and others. There were other players getting injured in the game that went off on offense for the Lions. It was really difficult to watch this defensive performance. And I noticed this. Curtis has been putting the questions on. I've just ripped this one off now. Last and only question in the press conference: how concerned are you about the defense? Pete Carroll, work to do, hit the film. And then apparently that was the only question on the defense. Now, listen, I don't have a massive issue with that, immediately after a win, because I have done not thousands. I've done over 1,000. Actually, I don't know how many I've done. It's, when you kind of do 3 games a week in broadcasting for the last, 15 years, I have no idea how many post-game press conference I've done. Robbie, I do one-on-one interviews. I don't sit in a press conference and have 2 questions. I will do a one-on-one interview with all of the questions for, anywhere between 6 to 15 minutes. So I've kind of got, what I'm saying is I can speak from experience as to how I would have handled this. And after a team has won, you don't generally tend to go 2-footed, as we would say over here, because that's a harsh tackle in soccer football. You don't tend to go 2-footed on the coach and start asking him loads of negative questions because they've won. But what you would do is wait until the next opportunity to speak, and then you would get into it, because that feels like a more reflective time. You're not in immediately after the game. It's time to perhaps bask in the glow of a victory. And then after the event, you sort of sit down and go, right, okay, your defense is, this is what I will be saying to Pete Carroll tomorrow if I was doing the Brock and Salk interview. You've got a massive issue with your defense, haven't you? That's another 520 yards given up. What's going wrong? And just put that to him and make him explain it and say, this is the 4th year in a row that your defense has started very poorly to start a season. Why does this keep happening? And then you could sort of go, how do you fix this? Are your players good enough? Have you got the players you need to play this scheme? Have you got to make serious adjustments here? Because you can't keep doing this every single week. Otherwise, it is going to cost you games. It didn't yesterday, but it will in the future. And you can go on a strand of, and I would do sort of 4, 5, 6 follow-up questions on that, Robbie, because I think it is a subject that warrants challenging. Because you've got half an hour on that show tomorrow, and the press will have about 20 minutes with him afterwards. You've got plenty of time to talk about Geno and the offense and Rashad Penny and Tariq Woolen. But this warrants a 3, 4, 5, 6 question strand on the defense as well. And there has to be some answers here, Robbie. It can't just be blown off, afterwards. It's got to hit the film, got to keep getting better. We've been here too often over the years, haven't we, where the defense is just a shambles. Did you hear that?
Sorry, there you go. I was my mute button wasn't working for a second. I mute. Yeah, and I totally agree. I'm so sorry, and I'm also reading the comments here that someone said took the ball and won today. I think they're referring to what I was saying earlier about Geno not taking the ball and winning the game. What I mean is like, he converted some third downs and such. And again, I'm not trying to knock Geno Smith when I'm saying this. I mostly was just saying like he needs to take the ball and go win us the game, not like, convert the third downs and then hand the ball off to Rashad Penny, who won the game, in the offensive line. So again, I think I was just reading the comments. Someone was commenting on that. And so I just wanted to make sure I clarified that I want to see him, under 2 minutes, take the ball and go down and win, and get a win in that way. So anyway, sorry, got sidetracked with that. I think that, I agree. I think the only thing I'd really like to see kind of like that Pete to come out and say is just like, yeah, we messed up here and we need something to do. We need to do this, give us like an explanation instead of just like, oh, we need to do better. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if you were on that show, I'm sure you could probe the questions, but no one's going to ask him the right questions, right? And he'll sidetrack it, and he'll highlight a couple bright spots, but he won't actually point to the the actual.
Yeah, but
issue
that's frustrating, though. I mean,
it's super frustrating.
It's really frustrating because nobody's saying like, look, there's a way of asking a question. You don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to go in there and be like, Pete, your defense is terrible. How on earth do you look at yourself in the mirror every day with that defense? You don't have to go in all that. You can just say, look, Pete, this has not been good enough for 4 games now. How are you going to sort this out? I mean, that's just a perfectly legitimate question that I don't think he would be sniffy about. I mean, if he was, you could just throw back at him, well, you've given up 520 yards to the Detroit Lions without any of their key starters. Yeah. Isn't it a fair question to put to you, Pete? How are you going to? So I'll ask you again. How are you going to sort this defense out? That's just a question that needs to be. Because look, Robbie, I said before, I didn't really care whether the Seahawks won this game or not. I'm not that invested in this season because I think it's a process this year. I don't expect us to win the Super Bowl, frankly, in 2022. It's a process. I just want to see green shoots. Now, a game like today gives me a bit of confidence for the offense. Because I see things. Now, I think you can also read too much in today because the Lions are absolutely bloody awful. But I saw something on offense and made me think, okay, this Shane Waldron, who I've doubted, he did a good game today. Let's see if we can do it against a superior defense next week against the New Orleans Saints. But I also want to see the defense look reasonably good, Robbie. I'm not expecting it to be elite, but it has to be better than joke show. It has to be better than circus level. It has to be at least competent, I think, or trending upwards. At the moment, it's get in the sea. That is awful.
Well, and they got a good opportunity right next week against the Saints, who appear not to be a very good offense right now. So this is a good opportunity for them to come out and kind of show some dominance. Now, listen, if the Saints come out and start running up the score put up, in my opinion, if they put up over 28, the defense is failing big time, right? I mean, they've got an opportunity now to do something and maybe start getting some leverage back on that side of the ball and really put some plays together and get some turnovers and things. And I really think this is the opportunity for them to have an opportunity to turn it around and get it right. And back to kind of what your Pete thing was, what I was saying is mostly like, I think even if you ask the question, Pete would sidestep and kind of do what he just did, and just say, got work to do, we'll figure it out, and just kind of not really say anything, and then he'll kind of flip it to the positive things. Oh, we got some players doing this, that's great.
But that's fine. I'm really sorry to interrupt. That's fine. Mm-hmm. When you've been interviewing a guy for 12 years and you anticipate the way that you just anticipated how he's going to answer that, you just plan and prepare. So you imagine, okay, if I ask that and he answers it this way, this is what I'm going to follow up with. So if he takes it in that positive direction, you've got your next question in your head already or written down. Okay, I'm going to go here if he goes there. So it's no different than actually playing a game of NFL football.
But do you think Seattle media would actually do that? That's some question.
But it's fine. They should be doing that because I'm not asking for someone to hold Pete's feet to the flame. I'm not asking for them to get a bow and arrow out during the press conference. Go, you will answer this or else. I'm just saying to them, look, just ask a couple of probing questions about the defense and try and get. And even if he dodges it, just be seen to be asking the questions. That's all we're asking for right now. That's all we want to see.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've got a point on the defense. I think there's two issues for me on this defense. I think the first issue, Robbie, is that I think it's a jumbled up mess of a scheme. I think I don't think Peters surrendered everything to Clint Hurt and to Sean Desai and said, go and do the Fangio defense. I think that they've kind of borrowed some of that, and in Pete's and it's a too many cooks spoil the broth situation again, which has often been the case with Pete Carroll. It was when he was sticking his oar in on the offense, and it is now with the defense. And I think in many cases, he just needs to make a decision on what this defense is going to be. Is it Pete Carroll's defense? Is it Clint Hurt's defense? And if it's Clint Hurt's defense, Pete Carroll needs to get the hell out of the way. But if it's his defense, then fine. But then you run your defense, that 4-3 under stuff and all of that jazz again, and have Darrell Taylor as a Sam linebacker and look, whatever. But I called it a Frankenstein's monster of a scheme, and it is. And it's not good enough, Robbie. And I think they need to sort of go back to the drawing board with that. But it's all well and good me saying go back to the drawing board 4 weeks in. You've wasted a whole training camp trying to set this thing up. You know, you should be coming in and all right, maybe that first week's not a well-oiled machine, but often defenses are superior in that first week than offenses anyway, Robbie. That first week tends to be a bit of a mess. And offenses tend to start slowly, especially when they've got new staff and new personnel. But I think with the defense, it's, you know, you had to be showing more than this, and this is look, he's just going to have to make a call. And I think this is part of the problem with Pete is he just tries to be too involved in everything, and he's not become that figurehead that I think he could be really brilliant at, who just sort of is the overseer, who is the motivational leader, the heart and soul, the face of the franchise. But let other people do the X's and O's and all that jazz. I don't think he's not done that. He's clearly not done that, and he's got his finger in the pie again. And it's a continuing problem for me. And I think the other problem is, Robbie, is they just haven't got any good players. I think that when you actually look at that, you know, your best defensive lineman is what, a 35-year-old, 340-pound nose, and Hal Woods. Your best pass rusher, Darrell Taylor, can't play the run to save his life and is seemingly now drifting towards just being a fringe situational pass rusher because he's not starting on the position anymore. They put the other guy in that they pulled off waivers after the cut down day. So he got injured again today, so I don't know what they're going to do next. You've got a reliable player in Uchenna and Wosu, but you know then you've got a bit of promise with Boya Mafe. The rest of your defensive line, your front are not doing it. Poona Ford's a terrible fit in this scheme. Brian Monet's Brian Monet. I don't know why they paid him, what they paid him. Jefferson's not having an impact, is he? Your linebackers, we've talked about them. They're not very good. Quandre Diggs is nothing special. I don't know why they paid him as much as they did because he isn't very special, I'm afraid. You know, I know it's sacrilege to say that. And I like his attitude, and I like the fact he's the one who speaks honestly after a crap loss like he did last weekend. But he ain't special, is he? He's getting a special salary. And then your cornerbacks, that they're a mix of, you know, not very good and youth. And yeah, as a collection, Robbie, it ain't good enough. You know, when you think to even like a reasonable defense needs an impact pass rusher, doesn't it? It needs somebody who can consistently create pressure, if not two of them. You just need to be basically steady at your linebacker positions and safety positions, and you've got to have a good cornerback at least. Now, hopefully, Tariq Woolen will become that guy. And you talked about him, and to sort of bring it back to him, that interception today, I'll take Richard Sherman's word for it because I don't know anything about playing cornerback, and he does. He says on that kind of coverage, it's really difficult to get an interception. And he read it, and he because he's got the speed and the athleticism, it was great. I think in the broadcast he said that Pete Carroll's said to them he's been waiting 40 years for a quarterback prospect like Tariq Woolen, who's got that size, speed, and length. And 2 interceptions in 2 games, Robbie. It's nice to have a quarterback who can actually make an interception this year, and it looks like they've actually got one of those for once. He looks like he's becoming a good player, but obviously he's a rookie. He's very raw, and we are seeing penalties as well, and some flubs in coverage. but he's one player who you can look at and go, okay, for the next 5 or 6 years, hopefully he's going to become a really good player. The problem is, Robbie, I don't think there's many others on this defensive unit. You've got veterans, and it's not all young. You've got veterans who are just meh or worse, or you've got people who you hope are going to emerge in the future, like your Woolens and your Maffeys.
Yeah, and I think the scheme, kind of what you're talking about, that's like probably the biggest thing. And Pete having his kind of his hand in the mix again, and not really getting to run the scheme, because I'm not seeing a lot of the things that Clint Hurt was talking about at the beginning of the season, which is like disguised blitzes and all these kind of things. I'm not really seeing that a lot, and so yeah, I think, we've talked about this multiple times about Pete kind of stepping aside and letting, the coordinators take over. But for me, I'm really excited. And I think I saw someone said the cornerbacks are the bright spot on the D, and not saying something. But I am really excited about the corners. I think Tariq Woolen, that play he made today was fantastic. I'm okay with even some of the penalties and even the blown coverages, as long as he learns from it and makes and can mold into a better player after learning that. And like I said, I still got, high hopes for Kobe Bryant. But, when you're spending so much money and so much resources on the safety position, really leaves you not much to spend anywhere else. And I think that's where we need, that money was better, much better spent on maybe the D line, and you're right, Darrell Taylor really looks like he's regressed in the system and can't play the run. There's some bright spots, but there are a lot of holes to fill, and I don't know if it has something to do with the actual scheme change, or if that's just the way it is. But hopefully it's time to really get some changes going and let some of these, let Clint Hurt and Sean Desai make some of the play calls and let them kind of figure out what we're doing on defense, because Pete has too much control over that.
Yeah, and I think I certainly think the talent is. I mean, the scheme is an issue, but I think the talent is maybe even a bigger issue, because I think you can, with the scheme. But I can always hope that Pete's just going to go, for God's sake, Pete, just take a bloody step back and just let somebody else run the defense. And I don't know if that's sort of giving an excuse to Clint Hurt, because maybe he just isn't good enough. Maybe he's just not good enough. He's a first-year defensive court. Maybe he's not good enough. That's certainly possible. But it just seems to me, again, like when you hear Clint Hurt saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this in the offseason, and then you've got Pete going, no, it's not that different, the scheme. It's not that different. I've done this for years. And you're thinking, are you getting in the way again, Pete? Because you love to, don't you? You love to get in the way, and it kind of feels like he's in the way. But the talent is a big thing. And look, I just wish, and don't be overly negative off the back of a win, but I just wish they'd been a little bit more conservative. And this is what I think the problem was, Robbie, with the way they handled sort of the immediate aftermath of the trade. They've been very, what's the right word? Disciplined. Very disciplined with their picks. They didn't trade any picks after trading Wilson. They've not traded any 2023 stock or anything like that. They've said, okay, we're going to use these picks in the future. We're going to just take stock. But then they went on a bit of a spending spree in free agency, including a lot of money next year. And, I just remind people that the Seahawks, in terms of cap space for 2023, they've only got $31 million of effective cap space for next year. People keep talking about loads of cap space as if they've got $100 million to spend. 31 million's about what they had when Russell Wilson was here, because they're paying so many players loads and loads of money. The Bears have got 100 million to spend next year. We don't. We have 31 million. Do you know what? We actually have, given everything that the Bengals have spent on their O-line and everything like that, the Bengals have actually got $7 million more dollars in effective cap space than we have. I'm looking at the list on here. The Seahawks have got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th most cap space for next year, which is ridiculous. They should have more than that. They should have more to spend. We should be looking forward to free agency, but we're not going to be, and people will realize this eventually. Eventually people will come round to it, because they're already paying a lot of people. So, like next year, Jamal Adams is going to cost this team $18.1 million without a means of getting out that contract, really, without taking an enormous dead hit. You can cut people like Gabe Jackson. I mean, I don't want to go off on a tangent here. The Seahawks are so strict, Robbie, with not using the credit card on cap. Why are they obsessed, addicted almost to dead cap? Like, if you want to get rid of Gabe Jackson next year, it's going to cost you $3 million to part ways with Gabe Jackson if you want to cut him. How have they got themselves into a contract where they're going to be eating $3 million just for the shits and giggles of getting rid of Gabe Jackson? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So anyway, that's just wasted money. Shelby Harris's contract next year is $12.2 million. Quandre Diggs' salary next year, $18.1 million. The same as Jamal Adams. You're going to be paying $36 million for two bloody safeties next year. How has that happened? How has that been allowed to happen? Quinton Jefferson's contract, $6 million next year, and comes with $2 million dead cap hit. There's a lot of things here that they just don't add up. And I actually look at some of them. You know, I'd rather have not paid Quandre Diggs and had the ability, if I wanted to go and sign someone like Jesse Bates next year, who's going to be a free agent after leaving the Bengals. I'm having a look at which free agents are out there. I mean, I can't see the Broncos letting Bradley Chubb get away from Denver. There aren't many great options. I mean, unless you wanted to have a dabble on someone like Marcus Davenport, who's been a bit of a disappointment in New Orleans, given that they traded up for him. Can't really see any big, interesting free agents in terms of pass rushers, I'm afraid. So, interior defensive line, yeah, unless you wanted to have a go at an aging Fletcher Cox, not so many great options there either. So, not great, to be honest, in terms of the free agent options there, Robbie. Maybe they knew that anyway. Maybe they thought, well, we're not going to be big spenders anyway next year, so we'll just keep these guys that we've got around.
Well, didn't you say you had some late round flyers on some safeties that you like? So maybe there you go.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to improve the defense in terms of talent. They've got to have people, guys have got to step up, and they've got to find. And this is another thing is they've got to find some guys like, you know, when you find a Tariq Woolen, you find an Abe Lucas in round 3. Got to find some guys, and they did. You know, that's what it was 10 years ago. They found players without having to go big in free agency, without necessarily, you know, you've got to find a Chris Clemens from somewhere. You've got to find, you know, those guys that can be your glue guys, that can be impact players. They've got to do that, Robbie. They've got to find that pass rusher in round 2 or round 3. They've got to find that great defensive tackle in round 4. You know, they've got to find those guys now. That's what it's going to come down to, I think, because looking at the list of available free agents, looking at the money they've got to spend, they aren't going to be able to do that in the off season, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say they have. You've seen it happen before. We've been able to do it, and you've seen the Broncos do it. They completely rebuilt their defense after a year after they lost us in the Super Bowl. So I mean, it's possible. It's for sure possible. They got to make the right moves to fit the scheme, and you know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, right. I think that's about as far as we go. If anybody's got any last super chats, send them in. We will come to any last questions that you have. If you want to bang one in there. Feel free. Great to have as many people listening again today to this broadcast, and we've covered a number of topics. Look, we cover a wide range of topics on here. If you just want a basic rundown of the game, and I feel like we've talked a lot. I mean, like the vast majority of the pod has been about the game. Then we've gone into that. But if that's all you want us to talk about, I think we'd be letting you down. I think we've got the Seahawks. As a grand subject, I don't think there's anywhere else that gets into this kind of level of detail with a discussion as we do. So I think that it's important that we get into these conversations about the future as well as talking about the game. You know, what does it mean for the future? What is to happen in the future? I think it's all a very, very important discussion point here. A quick heads up to what's going to come on Seahawks Draft Blog this week. I am going to post my quarterback review from the weekend, which is huge. Again, that'll be coming out tomorrow. I did a video on the quarterbacks last year and spent about 40 minutes talking about them, Robbie, and then went back to listen to the recording, and for some reason the audio just cuts out after 20 minutes. So it was a complete and utter waste of time. So I'm hoping that won't happen again, so I can actually get that video out there. So we're basically running over the same things I'm going to put in the article tomorrow. So SeahawksDraftBlog.com for that. I am heading to the London game next weekend. So I am going to be watching the Seahawks game either. I'm going to try. What I was going to try and do is try and have a chat with Rondale Robinson while I was there, because he's with the Giants, and I thought he might have some interesting stories about Will Levis, but I'm not sure because the Seahawks game might have kicked off by then, and I don't want to miss it. So what I might do is about to stay in the press area and watch it on my iPad, and then I'm going with the guy who's going to drive. Hopefully, he's going to agree to drive, so I can watch the Seahawks game on the drive back from London, and then hopefully by the time I get here back home, it'll just be around when the game is finishing. So I could just come in through the front door and jump straight on the instant reaction live stream. But if it is a little bit later next week, I'm just sort of setting. If it's maybe an hour later, it's not so instant reaction. It's just reaction in the general vicinity of the game. Then that's why, because I will be at the London game. So we will see. Anyway, Seahawks win 2-2. Robbie, always pleasure to have your company. Thank you as always. Thank you to everybody for watching. I say great numbers for the live broadcast so far this year. Much appreciated. Thank you for the one super chat today as well. Much appreciated. Patreon, if you want to help the channel out. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video because it really helps and spread the word. Until next time, bye for now. See you soon.